In the last video, we looked at the general requirements of the outline and explain 10-mark question on A-level sociology. Here, I'll do a quick recap of what that was before looking at the process of writing an answer to a specific question. To recap, the outline looks like the first picture and the explain the second. These are the general rules. You might want to press pause to remind yourself of these if necessary before we look at these applied to a specific question. Let's start with this question. Outline and explain 2 changes in society which have contributed to the increase in single-person households. This is worth 10 marks. For these 10-mark questions, try to break down the different parts of the question. In this case, the first part is to identify the specific change in society. And the second part is to think about the increase in single-person households. Remember, an alternative to living in a family is to live on one's own. A useful starting point for these questions is to be aware of what the statistics tell us. You don't need to memorise the exact numbers, but you do need to be aware of the general pattern or trend. Because you might get a question on any of the different demographic trends on the specification. It is vital, therefore, that you're familiar with all of them. Here, the Office for National Statistics tells us that single-person households have increased. The graph from the ONS shows us the proportion of one-person households by age and sex. And here we have the graph that shows the people living alone by age group and how this has changed over time. Note this graph is different from the previous one because it includes those aged 65 to 74 and the 75 and over category. Just have a look at who it is that's living on their own. This will help you with your answer to this question. Based on what we've just seen, the next step is to think about the possible reasons for this. You could write this down, or in the exam, where time is limited, you might just want to jot down your 2 main ideas. These are some of my ideas for possible developments. Remember, we're not writing our answer just yet. A change in society related to divorce would give you the opportunity to write a detailed paragraph in response to this question. Another, which I think would be quite a good development here, would be in relation to death. You could use your knowledge of this topic to help explain the increase in single-person households. And a third possible reason could be to consider the issue of individualisation. There are other changes, but for me, these are the big 3. Remember, as per the question command, you only need to develop 2 of these as separate paragraphs. Therefore, in the exam, choose the 2 that are suitably different and separate from each other, and also that you're able to write about in the most sociological way with relevant concepts, detail and appropriate sociological evidence. I'm going to do a worked example here. This is my opening sentence to the first paragraph. I now need to spend the rest of the paragraph developing this point in relation to the specific question asked. The next sentence I've written here explains this point. And here we see further development. This is all part of the same first paragraph. Further development can be seen here via the use of theory from a feminist perspective. Also note the use of evidence from a study and the concepts that are used throughout, such as conjugal roles, domestic labour. The last sentence here is a good example of the link back to the question. Although what is referred to as bolt-on or learned evaluation does not score particularly for this question, in context evaluation, such as the last paragraph here, does. Note this is an example of one paragraph in relation to this 10-mark question. There is no introduction, no conclusion, because they are not required. Having completed paragraph 1, we now turn our attention to the second paragraph. This is the opening sentence to the second paragraph, and then, as I did before, I need to spend the rest of the paragraph developing this point in relation to the question. As before, the point made in the opening sentence of the paragraph is explained. Here we can see reference to evidence. There's even a named study in here as well. This next section does a bit more with regards to steering the question back to the question asked. We must address the single person household part of this question, and that can be seen in this attempt here. The next sentence is a good example of how to develop your answer in more detail. In this case, discussing the consequences as a result of this, or this leads to. Taken together, these two paragraphs represent the expectations of an A-level sociology response to a 10-mark question, such as this, and we're assuming under time conditions. Note there's two separate and different changes. They're explained in relation to the question, and they make good use of sociological evidence in both cases. Going back to the general rules for this question, and the general mark scheme, it would be fair to say that this answer would get into the top band. In the exam, please make sure that you're applying these general rules and procedures to your answers to these type of 10-mark questions.